Monday night there was, shall we say, an interesting discussion on the developing rivalry between Bayley and Sasha Banks on Raw. There's an undeclared civil war going on, and what was happening Monday night in the live blog, between people that thought Bayley was in the right and people who thought Sasha Banks was in the right. I found it fascinating myself watching the two sides go back and forth. To be quite honest, probably because I was a vocal defender of Sasha Banks in the whole deal. Let's examine the two very important components of this angle. There's the direct storyline that we have been privy to over the last few months on WWE programming. But there's also the meta story that has developed between the two since their program in NXT in 2015 for the NXT Women's Championship. Now, it should be noted in the interest of fairness that this meta story is largely a creation of the fans' own imagination. It doesn't mean that WWE won't use some of these elements in the future, just that for right now, we are mostly riding in the fantasy booking territory. Now, if we're looking at this from the perspective of the meta story, you can make the case that Sasha Banks should be the heel in this feud. Bayley took all of Sasha's verbal abuse in NXT. She overcame what many people considered to be, at that time, the best female performer in the world in Brooklyn at TakeOver in 2015. Then outlasted her in an Iron Man match at TakeOver Respect that October to definitively blow off their feud and prove once and for all that Bayley was a credible champion and that Bayley deserved to be the NXT Women's Champion. Bayley and Sasha's friendship was largely born out of the respect, hence the title of the show, both women had for one another coming out of that match. But as we all know, deep down in her heart, Sasha is probably jealous of the fact that she couldn't beat Bayley on the big stage. That's become her MO in WWE since her call-up to the main roster, honestly. Sasha loses when the lights are brightest. Each time she won the WWE Women's Championship, she would lose the title immediately on pay-per-view in her first title defense. If memory serves, she's never had a successful title defense on the main roster. It is a stark contrast to what she was in NXT. Now here comes Bayley, the woman that started the downfall of the boss, as it were. Remember, Sasha's final two matches in NXT were against Bayley in Brooklyn and at TakeOver Respect in the Iron Man match. Sasha's troubles began afterward on the main roster. It could be argued that Sasha views Bayley as the person that sent her down the wrong path. Got her away from being the boss that handled everything, well, like a boss. Maybe in Bayley she sees the person that led her astray, and that has preempted Sasha to take a few pot shots at her here and there. First in the Rumble, then at Elimination Chamber. In this light, Bayley could make the case that yes, she's being victimized by Sasha's jealousy. It paints everything in a new light and gives gravitas to the story. But let's back up for a second. If we go simply by what we've seen on WWE programming, we get a very different story. Sasha's ruthlessness in the Rumble and the Elimination Chamber makes sense in the context of those matches. It's every woman for herself. Sasha hadn't been trash-talking Bayley or putting her down outside of those matches. Sasha, as an opportunist, was trying to win those matches, yes. But there are matches that both she and Bayley had agreed to participate in on good faith, knowing the two may have to go against each other to win. And how did Bayley respond to this? By leaving Sasha hanging in a tag match? By leaving her to get beat down by absolution, knowing what was going to happen if she left? By rebuffing Sasha's attempts at reconciliation? If you want to read ill motives into Sasha's words, you have that right as the fan. But WWE has yet to present anything that really pushes you in that direction, other than the Rumble and the Elimination Chamber. Now, if you go by the meta story, Bayley has a right to be pissed off. But going by WWE programming, you can make the case that Bayley is taking Elimination Chamber far too hard. It comes across as Bayley whining, having sour grapes. That makes Bayley the heel in a lot of fans' eyes, and myself included. Now, pragmatically speaking, irrespective of everything else, Sasha Banks is a tremendous heel and should have turned heel long ago. Bayley can play a heel. We know this from her time on the independent scene. And some rather colorful tweets that her character used to send out. Let it not be said that Bayley is incapable of dropping F-bombs like a sailor. If you've ever visited her Twitter feed in the distant past, you'll understand what we're talking about. But if you get beyond the pragmatic argument and look solely at what has been presented on TV by WWE in the last few months, Bayley and Sasha both have been passive-aggressive towards one another. But it seems that one has a more legitimate gripe than the other. And to be frank, the person with the right to be angry is Sasha. This is a problem if WWE intends Bayley to remain a babyface. Now, if Bayley indeed goes heel in this feud, it's all hands on deck. Let's see where the story goes. In general, I think this story has been told much better than most. It doesn't bother me that it's not for the title either. Sometimes stories can stand on their own without needing the title. This is one of those cases. It also opens the door for Nia Jax and Alexa Bliss to get a WrestleMania moment. We'll get a clearer picture of where we're going with this after WrestleMania. Both Bayley and Sasha are participating in the Women's Battle Royal in New Orleans. We could see the final setup for the feud happen there. But I know this, however the story unfolds, Bayley and Sasha are two of the most well-rounded performers in the women's division, across the board. If you were a fan of NXT in 2015, you were privy to one of the greatest angles, one of the greatest matches, and one of the greatest stories that we've seen in a long time. It could go down as one of the greatest women's matches in North American history. These two are more mature now. They've grown as performers. They're more experienced. We could be in for a real treat this year if WWE lets them tell the kind of a story that we know they can tell. And I've brought this up before and I will say it again. There is no greater stage for this feud to conclude at than in Brooklyn. Their first match was at TakeOver in Brooklyn in 2015. That was the first Brooklyn TakeOver show, and it was the first show of this series of August shows that the WWE has done in Brooklyn. Starting in 2015, they had the TakeOver and SummerSlam specials packaged together, creating a WrestleMania-type atmosphere in August. That was 2015. That was the first showdown. Now we come to SummerSlam in 2018. It'll be the last in Brooklyn, at least in this stretch. With WrestleMania going to New Jersey next year, it's very unlikely that SummerSlam will remain in Brooklyn. I can think of no better stage for this feud to come full circle on. But WWE has to be willing to let them tell the story. If WWE gets in their way too much, they could ruin what could otherwise be one of the best stories WWE will have a chance to tell all year. That's the quality of performers that you have in Bayley and Sasha Banks. It's not a great mystery. Look at what Sasha Banks did last night in the Mixed Match Challenge. Her and Becky Lynch had an amazing match last night. An amazing match. It was perhaps the best tag team match of the entire Mixed Match Challenge series. Bayley and Sasha can have that same match. They have the capacity. They are good enough in the ring to tell those kinds of stories. I hope WWE gives them a chance to really shine.